Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video, and of course everybody and their mother is super hyped for the worldwide celebration, of course being themed around the Cooler movie this year. And so to get ourselves prepared for the animation analysis videos that we will be doing, of course, on the new Cooler movie units from Worldwide, I figured it was the appropriate time to take a look back at the boy STR Cooler. This way we can kind of see what to expect from the new Cooler, what animations they could use. This will also probably tell us what animations they won't use, right? And this will also be interesting to see because obviously these animations are from 2019, so they are aged a little bit, but they do hold up very well in my opinion, and it will be interesting to see obviously how they look by today's standards. So let's go ahead and get into it here as per usual. We always watch it one time through and then we hit it with the analysis. I guess we'll take a look at these guys too, because I assume that we're probably also going to get a new Cooler Squadron unit, or some member of Cooler Squadron I'm assuming is going to be the individual who is like the unfeatured featured banner unit. So I will say, even though these are from 2019 and there are definitely some things about this animation that are a little bit dated for sure, even watching this off the get-go, I think these still hold up really, really well. And there are a lot of things in these animations that are sort of the like predecessor elements to a lot of things that you commonly see in Dokkan animations today. By the way that they have Cooler grow in the animations, so clean. They did that so well. The rotoscoping right here, by the way, I remember when that first happened, everyone went crazy for that animation. And this animation itself too still holds up incredibly well to this day. This looks really, really nice. There's a lot of very minimal small animation that puts this together very, very well. Such a good super attack. Okay, so let's take a look at the Cooler Squadron here first. Obviously, their animations are really not that good. Obviously, the Dokkan Fest units were, of course, not as crazy in terms of the animation department as they are now. So, of course, by proxy, the unfeatured featured units are nowhere near the quality that they are. We have some that are basically Dokkan Fest level now, but as you can see here, right, obviously with these guys, there is a lot of just quick movements with just basically putting the PNGs in there, snapping them about. To be fair, obviously this kind of fits with their whole dance motif because, of course, any of Frieza's men apparently just have to dance. That's just a rule in Dragon Ball. It's weird to me that they did that for some of them, but then like for Thouser here, they have this little bit of a fade. Very strange to me that they wouldn't just have it like the rest of this animation where you can see that it's just, changing from one pose to another. I guess they do fade, but the fade is a lot quicker on that, right? And it is a lot more difficult to notice it, right? Going from one frame to another. Whereas with Thouser's there, I feel like it is a lot more noticeable when you're watching the animation in full speed, right? Very weird. But again, this one, of course, we're going to hold to a lower standard, even more so than Cooler himself, because obviously, with this whole video, of course, we have to keep in mind that these are not modern day animations, so we can't hold them to the same standard no matter what. Oof. Okay, so this one is kind of rough. Obviously, this is just the SR and rare of all these guys, but the sort of like redrawn version of it, I guess you would say, quite literally going forward. This honestly, like back then, this looked okay, but by today's standards, this looks awful, obviously, right? This looks absolutely terrible because there's no movement on any of them. There's just an explosion, and you can just tell that it is quite literally PNG sliding forward, right? It does not look good at all. However, I do have to give it to them on the transitions here, even though I think that section, by today's standards, looks not that great. They do fade into white for that, and then they fade to white again to transition to the next scene, which is great because I feel like a lot of modern essays don't do that, and they just cut from one scene to another. So it's nice to see that, right? Because I feel like it's a lot more of a fluid transition, excuse me. Again, we have basically just the PNG sliding forward here with these two guys sliding off. I think that this isn't as bad because they are on the screen for a lot quicker than the main focus of that other section, right? Obviously here we have the fade from Dore, right, where he fades into this pose right here. Thankfully, they do have a quick one, but that kick does not feel very impactful. There isn't really, you know, any too much oomph behind it, right? You have Naze launch his attack here, which I think that section looks pretty good, to be honest. I really like the effect of the key. I think that they definitely nailed that too. Thouser going in with the Keyblade, which is really cool. This is also very nice. Funny enough, we've seen this a bunch in a lot of modern essays where they do these impact frames, especially with like sword slashing and stuff like that. Very, very cool. And honestly, this might have been one of the first essays to do that, or maybe one of the first, of a group of essays that do that, right? That's probably earlier in release. So obviously this is when they're destroying the planet, trying to, you know, basically take out Goku and Krillin. It's interesting that they sort of splice this together because obviously some of that is like from the fights with Piccolo that they each had. And then obviously this is like a later section where Goku's hiding, right? I think that this section honestly looks okay where they're just firing the Ki Blast. I don't know why they decided to fade Thouser when like Dore and Naze just, you know, go in and out like that. I don't know. It seems like a very strange decision as well. Another white fade, which is very interesting. You have the Ki Blast hit the earth as well. I think the rock effects and the smoke look really good. I will say the Ki does feel a little bit not very impactful, or it doesn't have a lot of like weight to it, I guess you would say, right? It definitely just feels like they're throwing sticks towards the planet. You know what I mean? Definitely not too crazy, but I will say, all things considered, even though obviously there are some sections of this that are a little bit rough, there is definitely some good things in here. And again, some things that, you know, later on more Dokkan essays would do, like the very nice key effects on Naze's attack. Obviously, the slash from Thouser right here, right? That's very nice. Obviously, the smoke effects also look very, very nice. And a lot of Dokkan essays in the modern day have very nice looking smoke effects. So there is some good. Obviously, it hasn't aged the best, but of course, we have the boy Cooler now. And I gotta say, I think he's aged pretty well, honestly. So, of course, we have the zoom in on his face here, which, funny enough, this is almost like a bootleg intro animation, if I do say so myself. Like, this is kind of something that gives me the same feeling of an intro animation, right? Where obviously it's just the characters showing up and then they would say a little something, but of course in this case it's just Cooler on the screen. You know, they literally just fade into him and then bam, there he is, right? But still very cool. And honestly, like, they didn't really need to do much for this or like really make him move or anything like that, because I think that the render looks good. Does he smile? I can't tell if he was always smiling or if he had a scowl before. By the way, very early transition into the card art on the unfeatured unit and on this one too. Very, very interesting that they go so quickly into the card art there. Alright, so then we have Cooler raise his head up. This part always bothered me a lot, where you would think that they would just have him raise his head up because, like, when it starts, right, it looks good with him raising it. But then they go to this very ugly fade that's, like, super obvious, right? I don't think the fade on his eyes closing, that looks super derpy, it's necessarily that bad, right? I think that looks fine with him opening and closing his eyes. But a more modern Dokkan essay, I feel like absolutely would not have had that fade effect, right, on his head for sure. So obviously after this, we have the eye lasers, which I think those look really, really nice. And two, not only do the actual beams look nice, but of course we have this very cool change in color scheme. An omen to Metal Cooler, perhaps. But we have the flash of white, and then of course the beams sort of forming around his face and like shooting backwards. Very, very cool, honestly. I really, really like the effect that they chose with this. I think it looks really, really nice. And of course the lighting too is very on point for Cooler as well. Very, very nice looking. Okay, so of course we have the beams fly up towards the sky, which I think this animation also looks pretty good too. The background in this essay is one of the things that I really, really like the most about it, to be honest. I think the background is perfect and really captures the time of day that this scene takes place in. So we have the sprite get hit here with a little explosion effect, and I gotta say the smoke is honestly the best part about this animation. I think that the key looks alright, but the smoke as the sprite is falling, this whole scene too looks extremely nice. The water effects look perfect, as he splashes down into the water, right, those effects also look perfect. I think that they absolutely nailed the sort of, you know, just water spewing out, right? It's kind of unfortunate that it does get cut a little bit short. Like, I almost would have wanted it to, like, have it finish the splash and you could see, like, the little droplets hit the surface of the water. But maybe they did that so they didn't have to animate that because they didn't know how to back then. You know, cutting corners where you need to is obviously, you know, good for the developer. And, I mean, it still looks fantastic in my opinion, right? So then we have the... well, what would be the enemy sprite, right? Flying downstream. Again, I think the smoke effects look very good, even though it doesn't look like it's moving a lot here. I think it moves just the right amount in the actual motion, and you can also see the character actually moving in the water there too, over the waterfall. This shot is super nice. This whole section where they get shot down and they fly into the waterfall looks really nice. Excuse me, I was gonna say, I literally choked because I disagreed with myself. Arguably better than Final Form Cooler's essay, but now that I'm thinking about that, I think I disagree with myself on this statement. Anyway, we go forward. Obviously, we have Cooler jump up towards the enemy here with a nice little splash of water, because obviously he would be standing in the stream. This always bugged me as well. This is another case where we have this extreme fade, right, on multiple occasions here, right? We have him fold his arms closed, right? We have him raise his arms up. I wish that they were not that, you know, like, I wish that they didn't use the fade as much as what I'm trying to say. Again, if this was a little bit more of a modern day essay, I think that they would have it actually fully animated. But even though this isn't a super high quality sprite, I think that this part definitely doesn't look bad in terms of how Cooler himself looks for sure. We obviously have him hover over the waterfall. I never noticed actually that he snaps from one spot to another, so I guess it looks good then. Right, then we of course have him fade a little bit. I think this one's a lot less noticeable because it's so quickly. It's literally like a frame, right? And we have, ooh, I never noticed that before. The key that's like sort of slashes across the screen. That's really cool. And of course the fire down into the waterfall. And this looks really cool too with the waterfall effect here. You know, looks very, very nice. The sort of water careening at the bottom as well. The beam itself looks good. And of course, the explosion that ends up at the bottom of the waterfall there looks really good too. And this ending shot is very, very cool. Obviously, sort of establishing how impactful this beam was as we have the water sort of spew up to Cooler still in the sky there with his hand outstretched from the beam. Very, very good, right? And then, of course, we cut to the scene where it's sort of the overhead where you can see the water, right, you know, moving back into place to cover up the hole that Cooler made, making a little bit of a vortex. I almost would have liked it if they didn't fade out this, because I would have liked to see more of the animation. They do kind of fade the water. This is really the only time that they use that sort of fade effect on the water. However, funny enough, I did just re-watch the Cooler movie recently with the boys, and I believe it sort of does the same animation, ironically enough. I think it maybe had a little bit more of like natural sort of filling the whole effect, but definitely not too bad, I think, for sure. And the waterfall in the background as well still looks really, really good. I like that they keep Cooler in the shot as well, because it sort of gives you an idea of, you know, where you're looking compared to where Cooler ended up, right? Very, very nice. Okay, so now we have the transformation animation. Funny enough, I will say, hydrate real quick. The waterfall in the background reminded me. So, I always thought that Cooler looked a little bit weird on this part. I think it's just because of, like, the black lines and he's so small, right? It just feels a little bit jarring to me, especially considering the rest of this looks so smooth. I think when he lifts his hands and he sort of steps to the side, it looks okay, right? Definitely nothing too bad, even though there is a little bit of fading in the actual animation. I think it looks alright. So we transition to this, and I gotta say, this blew me away the first time I saw this back when this unit released. This transformation animation is so clean. Let's go through this frame by frame. So we have Cooler obviously squatting down, getting ready to transform. They have a very nice sort of expansion section here, right? Where of course he grows bigger because the final form is so much bigger, right? And this looks really, really good. Super fluid. Of course, they use a little bit of that blurring effect or fade in, but I think it works really well in this part. And here, right, they make great use of averting your attention, right? Because you're like, oh, okay, the assets are growing a little bit bigger here. and then they sort of trick you because they make them really big without you noticing, because they do that zoom in and that little shock effect, right? Super great use of what's at your disposal, and obviously that's a great way to transition between the different assets on screen as well. Definitely very good. This also really impressed me. Like, this, I was so happy that this was the one part of this animation where they didn't use any of the fading shenanigans, because wow, look how natural this looks in the way that everything just grows off of Cooler's body. There is only like one little thing there, right, where you can see it grows rather quickly, but you can't really tell in the animation. And then, of course, right, he grows a little bit more. His head begins to collide with the waterfall with the spikes, which that looks super nice. The effect is super clean, even having it pour over Cooler's body. Oh my gosh, this is such a nice animation. They did this so incredibly well. We have the water still pouring over him. We obviously have the spikes on Cooler growing. Also, it collides with the waterfall here, and you can see that the water effect still looks perfect. I love the little I almost said sparkles. I mean, I guess the little splashes and bubbles that are coming off of him too. Obviously, now he is standing there with the sections of his body still in the waterfall and a little bit of water pouring over his body. Very nice animation. The actual transformation itself is so good. One of the best Dokkan animations from that era, surely, and the SA as well definitely contends with that too. This is one thing that was really unfortunate. More modern day SAs have been doing better lip flaps, right? Where a lot of the time the active skills either used to be they didn't even open their mouth at all, or, you know, they just had their mouth open and then the speech came out of the game, right? But of course for this one, he quite literally just keeps his mouth open, which is a little bit unfortunate, and that is something I'm looking forward to seeing the new Cooler do, is obviously actually talk in this section for sure. I will say it is going to be very interesting to see if they do make this guy a transforming Cooler, or if they just make him final form, because if he's transforming, they obviously have to include this animation in some capacity, because that's the only transformation animation he has, right? Because of course he's only in one movie. So it's going to be interesting to see how they update this, because obviously the actual transformation itself, right, like everything that we just watched in this section here, is really good. Like, really solid. It can definitely be improved in some areas. Obviously, the fading, right, maybe making things a little bit more smooth, but overall, like, it's super fluid and super nice to look at, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they upgrade that for sure. But I am excited to see how this section looks with the new animation, because of course we are going to get a new version, I'm assuming, of the mask covering up Cooler's face here. And this still looks really good now, right, with the mask actually, you know, taking form over his face, and then of course forming at the sides and sort of giving that dark shadow to his eyes, right? No complaints for me on that. I think it looks really good for sure. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're at peak now, boys. So this animation quite literally shocked me. And this, I think, was the first animation that I ever saw that made the community think that this animation was 3D, right? A lot of people I remember seeing with this, right? Goku goes to move around Cooler. A lot of people were like, they added 3D models to Dokkan? No, they did not. This quite literally looks like a 3D animation, especially when it's in even more of the fluid movement than, you know, we're obviously looking at it frame by frame, right? I love this at the end, by the way. They emphasize this so well with him zooming past the camera, right? And you even see him spin around back, which is so funny. And then, of course, come to a standstill where the enemy then begins to attack him. But I remember when this animation first dropped, a lot of people were like, they added 3D models to Dokkan because it just looks that good. But no, this is literally just a bunch of images. This is literally just a bunch of images playing in quick succession to give you the idea that that is in 3D. That technique in animation is called rotoscoping. And Dokkan has done that a lot in the modern day. I think this was the first time that I ever saw it in Dokkan personally. Maybe there was an earlier unit that did it, but this is certainly the first unit that I think really took advantage of it. It's so good. I'm going to play it for you in normal speed. Look at this, bro. Whoop! Look at that. So fluid, so clean. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to be curious to see if they do add that scene in the new unit, as well as this whole, you know, planting Goku in the ground animation here. It'll be interesting to see what they pick from, but it is going to be hard to top this one for sure. So obviously then, as Cooler lands there, we have the enemy come from the back, and the punch is super fluid, right? You have Cooler look back here super quickly, right? The animation of him looking back looks very, very nice, right? It's interesting that they have him go the other way before turning forward, which I feel like is almost a little bit natural, because obviously when you whip your head, you know, you're not in as control. We have a very quick punch, which I like that they emphasize with the white. It makes it feel a little bit more, not only just impactful, but natural, I think. Because you're not just seeing the naked eye is not just seeing this instant arm raise, right? That doesn't really have a lot of impact. But, of course, the white adds that, and the little bit of recoil on Cooler's fist also sort of implies, you know, obviously that it was a very impactful punch. I also think it's interesting that they add spit to the enemy character. Unless this is just supposed to be water that was still on Cooler from when he transformed, I assume that these little particles here are supposed to be spit from the enemy sprite, which, I mean, makes sense, because if you got punched that hard, you sure would be spitting for sure. But it's interesting to me because I don't really, can't really think of any other animations that do that off the top of my head. We have a very nice fade out of Cooler as he's going super fast. Of course, he teleports behind the enemy. This looks so good, dude. So, of course, the immediate, right, teleport in. And look at how fluid this animation is, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my gosh. This is sort of, at least in my mind, when I can remember, this was the beginning of these super fluid, very small animations for me, because I remember I saw this and I was blown away. This was way before I did animation analysis videos or anything like that. I saw how fluid this looked, especially in full movement, with how small the character was on the screen, and I was like, hold up, they can do that? This is one of the first examples, or at least one of the first examples that really sticks out in my mind, that they really started to go hard with that sort of thing. By the way, I love that obviously they have Goku clip the rock here, which I believe is, of course, accurate to the scene. We have the rocks explode off, and then the rocks explode as he hits the ground, right? The enemy sprite sliding against it with the smoke billowing in the background. I never even noticed Cooler super small in the background there, huh? That's pretty cool. Obviously, we have Cooler fly forward, and of course emphasized by the water effect, which looks really, really nice, right? Here he is. He's coming in hot, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the thing, right? This is something else that I want to talk about, because I think this is a great animation that does literally just using a PNG moving forward correctly. Because I talk about that a lot in my videos, where I'm like, wow, I do not like that this is quite literally just a PNG moving forward. And that's what this animation is, right? Obviously, the background moving looks good, the rocks, the dust, all of that sort of emphasizes the movement. But not only is this a really good angle, and this asset fits a lot more with the style of this animation, I think that the emphasis on Cooler moving with his body sort of getting a little bit bigger and smaller really helps drive home the fact that he's just flying forward like this. Because obviously in a lot of anime they do this where the character is sort of like jittering a little bit to sort of represent you're looking at them flying as they're flying, right? Because obviously they're standing still, quote unquote, on the screen, but the background's moving around them because they're flying. I think having them pulse like that really, really helps drive that home. Very, very good job on that. We have the fade into white to the card art. And then, of course, another fade and the infamous scene. Obviously, this is so good and so well animated. We have the fade from white, right? And the enemy sprite, this might be one of the best examples of an enemy sprite actually fitting in a Dokkan animation, I think. Because this is one of the only times where I was like, wow, the sprite actually kind of looks decent there. I'm not going to lie. We have Cooler fly forward. I love how he's stylized. I love the way that the asset looks. We obviously have this very small arm movement to sort of drive home the fact that he's given him the gut punch, right? The enemy sprite then flies forward with Cooler, right? As well as the rocks and dust, sort of emphasizing that too. This is really cool because this is also just a camera pan. I feel like some other essays, lesser essays one might say, would just cut from one scene to another here, but no, they actually follow Cooler. It's almost like the cameraman can't keep up, right? And they follow behind him to the dust sort of exploding here. I really, really like that. Now, we do have a cut here. Obviously, this is so well animated. We have Cooler fly in here, right? Hits the wall with Goku. His tail animation is also on point too. The explosion effect on the wall looks super nice. Cooler obviously touching down on the ground looks great. You have this zoom in shot on Goku here with Cooler's fist against him. Again, it's a little bit of a shame that the sprites are so poorly done. Obviously, they weren't poorly done when they were implemented, but by nowadays standards, right? Because, of course, this would feel so much cooler too, no pun intended, if Goku's stomach was like pressed in, right? Obviously, it's not, and they can't do that because, you know, the sprites are just PNGs in the game, but that would look really, really cool. Okay, so we have Cooler lift his arm up here with the rocks exploding off of the mountain face, right? He lifts Goku around. Again, so well animated considering this animation is sort of far away, right? Cooler even like takes proper steps here, right? You can see he lifts his leg forward and begins to kneel down, right? Planting your boy Goku in the ground. You can see the little bit of the rocks there. And then, of course, we have a zoom in shot to emphasize this of Goku getting pressed into the ground with Cooler there. And, of course, Goku flying forward with the dust and rock effects as he then shoots off to the lake that they were just fighting in. And I love this shot, by the way, because I feel like they could have just ended the animation here, to be honest, with Cooler just burying the guy in the ground, and that could have been the KO screen. Which, I mean, I guess would have been cool. But I really like that they emphasize this, that how far he goes flying. Not only does the rocks break, it follows through the grass, and then into the water you can see separates, because obviously the enemy is flying that fast and that far. And they even have the water actually properly collide with itself at the end there. That is a very small animation, and it's hard to notice, but you can see the water sort of moves back a little bit into place and is sort of sloshing in this, you know, like wall of water that has been made by Goku flying into the ground. So yeah, that is STR Cooler's animations. I gotta say, especially the normal super attack, right, that he has after the active skill, the transformation super attack, I think that animation holds out incredibly well to this day. That animation is, I think, probably one of the best animations that has stood the test of time. It's actually a top 5 video that I've really wanted to make for a while now, and I think this guy would easily be on that list for that animation, because I look at that and I think that that could pass for a 2021 essay for sure. It is really, really nice. Even the untransformed super is really good, but it's clear all of the time and effort for this unit went in to the transformation animation, which also still holds up really, really well to this day. And of course, that final super attack, right, looks really, really good. I am excited to see how they improve these existing animations and possibly compare them to your boy STR Cooler on the screen, and as well see what else they do from him and what other attacks they take for his various animations. This is, of course, one of his most iconic moves, so I am almost curious what they're going to end up taking from the rest of the actions that he does in the movie. It's going to be very interesting to see, and of course, when that unit comes out and whatever the other LR is going to be, of course, we're assuming it's going to be a Goku. I will be doing an animation analysis as soon as those drop, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Those will be very beefy ones, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of animations to look at. Obviously, they're all going to be super nice, so of course, we got to take a look at every little detail. And there's going to be a 2-for-1 special for you, ladies and gentlemen, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that one. But I am very excited to see what this celebration brings in the animation department. I hope you are too, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Dokkan, it's out. Peace.